Thank you, Sue. Thanks for the introduction, and welcome to everybody listening around the world. And hopefully, this is going to be a myth that we can bust. We are going to take a vote at the end of each one of these to see whether or not the audience has agreed with the point of view we put forward. So here is my one slide. There is something called Qual Quant. That is a myth, I believe. I'm perfectly happy to accept that projects can do Qual followed by Quant. They can do Quant followed by Qual. They can do some Qual and they can do some Quant, and then they can synthesize the findings. With all of those, I'm quite happy. What I'm not happy about are people who have been talking really in the last 2 or 3 years saying that with millions of comments online, with tens of millions of photos being uploaded, with hundreds of millions of hours of video, we have all that qualitative material, and so now we've moved beyond Qual Quant into a new thing, which is both Qual and Quant. And why don't I think that that exists, this new thing? Because there's no intellectual basis for it. Quant and Qual are actually very different animals. They have a different understanding of the world. They have a different ontological, epistemological background. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, Quant finds and measures something. It believes that the world is there to be measured, that if we do it properly, we all get the same findings, and that the results come from the tools. Qualitative research and the qualitative methodology, especially in the last 30 years, has a very different position. It believes that the researcher creates their findings. They don't discover the finding, they create the finding from what they see, from what they experience, from what they hear, see, whatever the medium is that they're researching through. The research is the narrative that they construct. It's judged in terms of whether it allows useful decisions to be made, as opposed to is it an accurate representation. So we have a different criteria for Quant, which is very much about is it an accurate representation. For Qual, it's really is it one of a potentially infinite number of useful narratives and descriptions. Now there is a close link between Qual and Quant. All Quant starts as Qual. And if we take the picture there on the left, picture of the Thames, the new building there, the Shard, if we wanted to count how many boats there were on the Thames, that sounds like a quantitative exercise. But actually, we have to decide what we mean by on the Thames. Does moored by the side of the Thames mean on the Thames? Does in the dock mean on the Thames? What about when we get to the estuary? At what point are we going to say that is no longer the Thames? Those are all qualitative decisions. So is the decision about what is a boat. Is a pontoon a boat? Is a barge being pulled by another barge a boat? So we make all of those decisions. We call that operationalizing. And when we have phenomena that we want to use with quantitative research, we have a process to operationalize things, and then we can all agree how many boats there are on the Thames. In classic quantitative research, there are two ways we can go about that operationalizing. If we use something like the Likert scale, how much do you agree with the views of David Cameron? Everybody has their own qualitative assessment. People do not carry around numbers or words that mean exactly what we want them to mean. So we show them the words, they decide where on the scale they're going. That is how we operationalize turning people's feelings into the numbers. Another interesting case is, what about where we have things like emotions? With Paul Ekman, this has become an incredibly popular area of trying to interpret people. If you do facial coding on a one-to-one basis as part of a depth interview, that's a qualitative exercise. If, on the other hand, you decide that I'm going to code this amount of squint, this amount of micro symbol as meaning this, then what you're doing is operationalizing, and it is Quant. So we start off with something that's Qual, we operationalize it, and we can get Quant. So I would argue very strongly that with every research technique, when somebody is coming along and selling you something new, you should have a look at it and say, okay, is that qual, in which case I should assess it on this basis, or is that quant, in which case I should assess it on that basis? But if they tell you it's both qual and quant and they've merged the two, just ask them what the epistemological basis for that is. Well, that's my case.